BookTube, welcome back to my channel. Today we're here for another Vlogmas video, and I thought today I would use Vlogmas as an acronym and spell out Vlogmas using book titles that I have read this year specifically, with one exception, and I'll tell you when I get to it. So here are 7 books that I have read this year, and most of them are books that I enjoyed for one reason or another. To start it off with V, we have Salable as the victim, and this one is a character study about a man who's living and working in New York City. His wife is away on some kind of a vacation, and his brother is away for work, and so he finds himself tending to his brother's wife and sick child. And because this is a character study, we get to see this main character in a lot of tense situations. For example, he's accosted by a former co-worker who accuses him of ruining his life. And he finds himself having to take responsibility for all these people who blame him for not having stood up for them in the past. A very interesting read. This is my first time reading anything by Salable, and I would like to read more from him in the future. For L, we have Last Orders by Graham Swift, and this one is a Booker Prize winning novel, which is very interesting in its format because it is an allegory, but it's also a very interesting story about relationships. In this one, we have a main character who has died outside of the novel, which is very strange, but we get to know him through flashbacks as well as through what his friends say about him. And the plot in this one is about his friends taking a road trip to the waterfront to scatter his ashes per his last request, his last orders. And what's interesting about this is not just the people who have decided to go on the trip, it's also the people who've declined to go, like his wife, his widow. And a lot of the stories about trying to understand why some people have gone on the excursion and why others haven't. Very interesting, and I think I filmed a review for this one. I just don't think it's been posted to my channel yet. So it's coming. You'll hear more about that one sometime later. For O, we have Peter Carey's Oscar and Lucinda, and this is a 1988 Booker Prize winning novel. I've started reading it and I haven't finished, so I can't tell you too much about the plot. So I'll read you the synopsis. In the back it says it is Peter Carey's novel of the undeclared love between clergyman Oscar Hopkins and the heiress Lucinda Leplastrier is both a moving and beautiful love story and a historical tour de force. Made for each other, the two are gamblers, one obsessive, the other compulsive, incapable of winning at the game of love. I'm planning to finish this one by the end of the month, so you'll hear more about it from me then. For G, we have The Great Gatsby by F. Scott Fitzgerald, and it took me a really long time, but I finally read this book for the first time earlier this year. And this is about a man who is obsessed with his neighbor, who is obsessed with this man's friend. Great Gatsby is a story about false appearances and about obsessing about other people's possessions, whether that is property or people, and trying to get the life that someone else has because you think that everything that they have is wonderful. In this story, Fitzgerald tackles themes like infidelity and pursuing one's ambitions through illegal means, and basically any underhanded way that one can go about fulfilling one's goals. So it's a very interesting story because of that. For M, we have V.S. Naipaul's Miguel Street, and this is a collection of vignettes set in Naipaul's native Trinidad. And here we have an unnamed child or teen narrator who's learning about adult life by watching his neighbors, and through the relationships that this young man sees played out in front of him and that he writes about, he learns about misogyny and domestic violence and a lot of very negative attitudes that make this book very dated, but also gives us a little look back at a time that doesn't exist anymore. And because this book was first published in 1959, we have to read it with the understanding that this is probably not a book that would get published in the 2000s. For A, we have All Quiet on the Western Front by Erich Maria Remarque, and this is from the perspective of a young German man who enlists in World War I along with his classmates. They enlist right out of high school, and so it is a coming-of-age story, but in one of the worst ways, because these young men, as soon as they're learning about life and what life requires, a lot of them lose their lives in the war. This was a very profound read for me, firstly because most of the books that I've read about World War I or II have been from the perspective of the people on this side of the war. And to see the universality of suffering, the fact that we're reading from the perspective of a German soldier and seeing how he encountered a lot of the same issues that, you know, people that we might have known who are veterans would have encountered. This just talks about the universality of suffering, and we get to empathize a lot with this young man, even though a lot of the soldiers that he was probably fighting against would have been people that we would have known and supported if we had been living in this time. And finally for S, we have Something to Answer For by P.H. Newby, and this is the inaugural Booker Prize winning novel. The Booker Prize was first awarded in 1969, and this is a novel that won it. This one is set in Egypt in the 1950s, and it's about the conflict over the Suez Canal. And we explore the allegory through the will of an English businessman who has died, and his friend, who's an English veteran, seems to think that his wife is a part of the will, and so he should claim her as well as the man's legacy. This is a very interesting story, and I did a review for my Booker winning series, so I'll link that video down below if you want to hear a little bit more about this one. So these are 7 books that spell out Vlogmas. I'll be back tomorrow for another Vlogmas video. Give me a thumbs up if you like this one, subscribe if you want to see more, and let's talk in the comments. I'd love to know if you've read any of these titles or anything else by these authors that you'd like to recommend to me. Let's chat in the comments, and I'll be back tomorrow for another Vlogmas video. Until then, happy reading. Bye. Baby? Hey baby, you didn't appear in this video. The people are going to want to know what happened to you. We're going to have to make sure you're in the next video, okay? Okay. What's up? Look. You want to say hi? Say hi. Say hi. You turn in your face every time I turn you. Say hi.